Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you for joining the session. I'm Niroshan Madam Pettige, your host for the day. Let me start the talk with a story that is untold. In 2008, my wife was pregnant. Voila, what a great news it was. Yes, it was a great news. Yet, it didn't take many weeks to let that become the toughest time in our life. Doctors predicted the baby is not healthy and will not last long. When the doctors advised us to go for an abortion, we said, not wait. We said no and wanted to carry the baby with a big life threatening risk for my wife. My wife was courageous to say, no, 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 that's not an option for us. Why? Because we knew it was a living thing. 14th May 2008 was the day. My wife had a stillborn baby. Time was around 3 p.m. It wasn't easy. It wasn't any good. It was a devastating experience that I and my family had to go through. My job was to carry a 90-inch coffin that had my unborn baby in it. With tears in my eyes, I was walking through the cemetery to bury the beautiful unborn baby. While carrying the coffin, I realized life is not easy. It's not certain at all. It's full of surprises. Yet, life is the most precious thing that can happen to you. On that day, I walked away from the cemetery with so much love, so much wisdom that my wife, and 8 years old daughter went through. That tough time was one of the best times in our life. That was a turning point in our life. Moral of the story is that face every situation with courage. Your victory is not so far away, irrespective of what the circumstance that you are going through right now. If you are to face the most toughest situation, do not worry. It's not going to last for long. Today, together with Dr. Shanta Yapa, I'm going to talk about the same thing, rising in a crisis. In other words, how do we do great in a crisis situation? Dr. Shanta is a professional manager committed to support organizations and industrial development with over 35 years of experience in engineering, banking, international business, ICT, and general management. He authored the book Rising in Crisis. He's also the first PhD from the Faculty of Management and Finance of the University of Colombo. He's a leader and a great educator with a great vision. I'm privileged to welcome one of the greatest leaders that Sri Lanka has produced, Dr. Shanta R Yapa. Please join me welcoming Dr. Shanta.
Thank
Hi,
you, Niro,
Doctor.
for inviting me.
It's
It's
my
a
it's
pleasure
my
to be with
privilege.
you.
It's my privilege to have you on the show, Dr. Shanta. Thanks for accepting it. One thing that I really appreciate is that that willingness to share your insights, your knowledge with the community, people around us. It's truly appreciative because it's not that everyone is willing to do that. Everyone is not ready to spend that time and energy. Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Welcome.
How are you? How are you today? How was the day so far?
Well, it was a hectic day with so much of activities, but I reserved time and energy to take part in this great event. I watched some of your past events and I was quite impressed. So I need to live up to the expectations of you and your audience. Look forward to have a very interesting discussion as we proceed.
Yes, yes, that's my wish as well. Yeah, so thank you for the kind words. So it's definitely going to be a great show because I know the insights that you can bring into the show. Talking about your 35 years of experience and particularly some great contents from the book that you wrote. Yeah, so rising in crisis, and it's very few Sri Lankans who would go up to the level of writing a book like this, and you are one of them. Thanks for being that, and truly you are an inspiration for all of us. So that's the reason why you are here. Yeah. With that, doctor, let's start the show, right? So at the same time, let's welcome our audience joining through Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you for joining with us. If you think this could help your colleagues, your family, your colleagues in your office, people who you don't know, just share the feed. I'm sure that's the least help we would expect from you, as long as we want you to enjoy the contents that we are going to discuss. Yeah. So if you do have any questions, you can log them in the comments from where you are, right? If you are in LinkedIn, you can use LinkedIn comment segment to put your comments, questions, clarifications, your insights. We will run through them during the session. If you are in Facebook or YouTube, same goes with that, right? Hoping for a great interactive session. Let me open up the discussion asking one of the fundamental questions from Dr. Shanta. Doctor, the very first question is simple, I would say. However, it's not an easy term to define. The term is crisis. And my question to you is, what is a crisis in your words? How do you define it?
Well, there are so many definitions to the word crisis. Um, Crisis is something we will never enjoy. We get excited when we face a crisis. There's no one accepted definition to the word crisis. My definition may be a hybrid one. It is
Right.
a disruption to the sustainability, continuity. We try to continue with what is going on. We call it the status quo. Disturbance to that equilibrium is a crisis. It is a very simple definition, I guess. We all can understand unfavorable things happening, threatening our continuity. I guess that is a decent, reasonable definition to the word crisis.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's a very simple way of defining it, and it's crystal clear, right? So, as you and the audience would have heard my own story, right? Very personal, touchy story that was the first time I ever told that to a public audience like this, right? I have been using this. To kind of coach my own 12-year daughter now. She was just 8 when this happened, right? It was devastating. As you said, it's unfavorable. It wasn't what we were hoping. It wasn't what the best news looked like, right? So that was a crisis in my term as well, right? So your crisis could happen physically, mentally, socially, psychologically, whatever the way, right? Anything that threatens your moves, right? Your progress, your natural way of responding to things, working is a crisis, as per the doctor's definition as well. So with that, doctor, now Why I asked that question is to get a provisioning into my next question, which is the most important question to start the discussion. Now, when you think of any crisis situations, right? The audience can think of anything that you believe is a crisis situation for you. It could, as I mentioned, it could be something personal, it could be something work related, it could be something psychological, right? It could be a mental struggle that you're going to go through, right? Or it could be a physical disaster or a pandemic like COVID, right? Whatever it is important that we understand your insights on this, doctor. It will be great for us to know your perspective here. The question is how, not how factor, right? In terms of crisis management, in terms of navigating through a crisis, what should be the attitude that every one of us hold in facing a crisis situation?
Well, to answer the question, what kind of an attitude is preferred in facing a crisis? I must
Yes.
necessarily say that we should have a good mindset, a positive mindset to face a crisis. If not, it is going to be more than a crisis, it is going to be a disaster to all the stakeholders in a crisis. So, having a good mindset to face the crisis is mandatory. You don't there's no reason for you to be panic. um, Understanding the problems we are going to face is very crucial in navigating through a crisis. As you know, how do we define a problem? We come across so many problems on a daily basis. In our offices, in our own places, we come across problems. A problem is defined as a gap between what is expected and what we experience, or it is the gap between what is desired and what is real, actual. A crisis will naturally lead to so many problems. So we need to be able to understand, foresee those problems in preparing ourselves to face any kind of a crisis. Nero, can I continue to explain?
Sure, doctor. Yeah, proceed.
Well, when I was thinking about addressing the topic rising in crisis, let me give you a quick overview as to how I started thinking of writing this book. Sri Lanka, we were on a partial lockdown from March last year. When the government announced the partial lockdown, we started working from home, most of us. But I was thinking how best I could help my audience, let's say professional managers and community like you, how best I can help to come up with various strategies in facing the crisis. Because in a crisis, it is very difficult, even if you are a very experienced leader, manager, entrepreneur, an individual, it is very difficult to think where to start because you are in a very complex situation. You don't know where to begin with, how to resolve. So naturally, you are in a very challenging situation. So I was thinking, rather than bringing X number of theories to understand, I was thinking as a layman, in a disaster, in a crisis, what do we do really? What can we do really? Then I realized that yes, in a crisis, what you try to do is, or what you can do is only two things. You need to reduce the unfavorable outcomes, and you need to increase or raise the favorable outcomes. Think of any crisis you are going to face. You are driving, you are on a downhill, driving faster than usual, let's assume, and you try to apply brakes, and you see brakes are not working. You are facing a crisis. Or you are a pilot, and with 400 people on board, you observe something, let's say a defect in the engine or some fire, and it is a real crisis. It's not only you, the passengers and property, and how you are going to land and so on. Here again, you have only, or rather, you need to take care of two things: how to bring down the unfavorable outcomes and how to increase the favorable outcomes. So emptying your fuel tanks and moving to an area where people are not living close to the sea beach or something like. Likewise, there are so many things that would come to your mind. Somebody is drowning, okay, and again, unintentionally, what we try to do is to increase the favorable outcomes and decrease the unfavorable outcomes. Based on that, I started thinking how best I can help people like you, managers, entrepreneurs, business leaders, how to face a crisis situation and how to survive. Survival is not our objective. We would like to grow. So, how to survive and grow in a crisis is what I have addressed in this book. I'm offering many tools, they are brand new, especially how to face the crisis, where to start, and most of us start thinking differently when we are facing a crisis. We try to implement new strategies without knowing whether they would succeed or not. So selecting the wrong strategy and trying to execute such a strategy, especially when you are facing when you are in a crisis, is your passport to failure. Okay, you cannot do trial and error things, especially when you are in a crisis. So there are tools. As we proceed, I can explain how you can use them. Nero, Nero, should I continue to explain? Nero, should I continue to explain? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Niro. Assuming that Nero is facing a technical problem and I'm audible and visible to the audience, I'll continue to talk. Well, in this book, I'm addressing almost all the functional areas of a business organization, starting from finance to human resource management to sales and marketing, which is a very important function in a business organization. I'm addressing production and operations management. I'm addressing then innovations. I'm addressing supply chain management. I'm addressing corporate communication. Basically, I do talk, including maintenance. I'm addressing 10 different functional areas of a business. What can we do in a crisis? Niro, can you hear me? Niro, can I continue to explain? Sorry about the disruption due to a technical error. We are back. Uh, I would quickly take you through what this book offers to you. In a crisis, we need to think differently to survive and grow. To survive, continuing in the same way with some strategies would do. But if you are looking growth opportunities in a crisis, definitely you need to do differently. So I'm suggesting in the book under the sales and marketing several strategies. One of the interesting things, I'm sure there are many marketeers, professional marketeers listening to our discussion. We all are quite familiar with the 4 Ps and 7 Ps. But I'm suggesting you to think of an option. Instead Ps, I'm offering you Cs. What is it? What are they? In 4Ps, we talk about product, price, place, promotion, and so on. But here I'm replacing same thing or different things I'm introducing. Instead product, I'm suggesting you to think of commodities. Why? In a crisis situation like what we are facing right now, the economic crisis, people are not having enough money. They are very careful in spending. So they are looking to buy only the core products, not the augmented products we are trying to sell. So that is the message. Instead, product, it is a rather a sharp focus towards the commodity, what you are offering, the core product. And I'm asking you to pay attention to communication channels, consumers. It's a long list of words starting with the letter C. Down the line, you would see some of the things you have never assumed as a marketer in addressing, in improving your performance in terms of sales, number of customers, value creation, and so on. Miro, I guess you can go to the next question.
Yes, thank you, Thank you, Dr. Shanta. Uh, Sorry about the technical glitch. Actually, my computer shut down, and I had to kind of restart the thing and come back. Yeah. So
A
with
crisis,
that, let's. Sorry.
a crisis, I said.
It's a crisis, definite crisis. So it happens by the time we talk about it. Yeah. So thanks for managing it until I come back. Appreciate it. So the next question, doctor. Right. So I missed a bit of insights that you were talking about, but let me resume the discussion here. In terms of crisis management, doctor, I'm sure you have been talking about certain basics and fundamental perspectives that you need to look into, right? So one thing that I realize, Dr. Shanta, now in going through any kind of crisis, whether it's a job loss, whether it's a non one is departing from your family, or whether it's a mental struggle, whether it's a economic crisis, whatever it is, right? Crisis basically challenges our health, right? Whether it's a mental health, physical health, economical or social health, it challenges that, right? One thing that I realized in that tough situation was that first it was a mind game, right? That is, the starting point of battling a crisis is how you process that, right? So my question is around that, Dr. Shanta. So I call it reframe the situation. I call it reframe the crisis situation, right? It is seen as a crisis, but sooner you can see the great value in that crisis situation. Example, pandemic, right? Pandemic allowed me to go to global context and start sharing and selling my training and coaching, right? Unless otherwise, I don't have that opportunity easily. I can, but it is not that easy, right? Since everyone was on virtual context, virtual platforms, right? I had that great opportunity to go out and say, hey, I'm doing this particular coaching session, I'm doing this particular workshop, come and join, right? It's surprising to see that in one instance, I scheduled a free session. The registration count, any guess, Doc? Is it between 500,000, 1,000, 2,000, or beyond that? What would be your guess?
Well, since you mentioned an upper limit, it should be
So it
the
was
number.
2,743 registrations globally. That covers almost all the continents, right? So this is
Great.
basically what I'm saying, right? So I managed to somehow navigate through it, reframe it. So, doctor, the question is this. Let me get that on screen. There is a problem. Doctor, you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
There is a problem in connection.
If you can read out the question, that would be great. Can you read the question, Nero?
Hello, doctor.
Yes.
Technical issue doesn't seem to help me, but let's resume. So the question is, doctor, this one, if you see the screen, reframing the situation, tell me how would you reframe a crisis situation differently? Is there any technique or a strategy that you can share with us?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned at the beginning. Thinking as a layman, what we do intentionally or unintentionally in a crisis, what kind of a response we are going to show. In the book, I'm offering a crisis response matrix. It's very difficult to explain it without showing that diagram to you. We can be aggressive in facing a crisis. We can be very conservative in facing a crisis. We can be proactive, we can be reactive. I'm sure you know what is meant by proactive and what is meant by reactive. It does not mean to say that always in a crisis we should be proactive. Sometimes there can be instances where we need to wait until it happens and take actions. So, selecting the right approach in responding to a crisis is very, very vital. But answering your question, now in a crisis, you may not have that much of time to think. One advice I would like to give is it is your mindset, it is your approach, positive attitude. There's a Chinese word in the Mandarin vocabulary. They tend to treat any problem as an opportunity. Prop ops is the English equivalent word to that Chinese Mandarin term. Prop ops. Any problem is embedded or coupled with couple of opportunities. It does not mean to say that we are waiting for problems and exploit them to earn profits unethically. No. But if we compare the mindset of other nations, I'm sure we all will agree that in a crisis we get disturbed unnecessarily, perhaps. So let's look at a crisis in a very simple way. What kind of damages we are going to face, okay, to various stakeholders. It's not only you, there are so many. If you think of an organization, there are so many stakeholders, your investors, your employees, the managers of the company, the customers, the suppliers, buyers, and the government, the other players in the industry. We have the mindset which I don't agree with. The other players in the industry, how do we call them? Competitors. Not necessarily the other players in the industry. They can be collaborators as well, especially when you are facing a crisis. So we need to understand what kind of an impact there would be for each and every stakeholder. So we need to address the vulnerable people, vulnerable institutions, stakeholders first, and take action. So an easy way to manage a crisis is think of how best we can reduce the unfavorable outcomes to various stakeholders and how best we can increase the favorable outcomes to various stakeholders. Easily you can prepare a list of favorable outcomes and unfavorable outcomes. Should we increase the unfavorable outcomes? No, not at all. We need to reduce them. What should we increase or raise? Favorable outcomes. Assume that you have a list of 10 in each column, 10 plus 10, 20. I'm not suggesting you to think of implementing or take action towards all the 20. You need to use common sense. You cannot implement 10 or 20 different things at a time. You need to identify the vital few than trivial many. Assume that you select 2 or 3 action items that will address key stakeholders, the impact to them. And thereafter, it is a matter of devising or developing, crafting the right kind of strategies and executing them. If you are running a business organization, even if it is an individual, I guess it is the same scenario, same actions you need to think of. I'm facing a crisis, what kind of unfavorable outcomes would be there to me and my stakeholders, my family, my workplace, my community, my circles, and so on. And what kind of favorable outcomes I can think of. Even in a crisis, we should be able to see, as Niro correctly pointed out, there are so many individuals and organizations who are exploring various opportunities. A crisis, my viewpoint is an opportunity to the prepared minds, isn't it, Niro? Should I continue to explain? I guess you have a long list of questions. We are facing a crisis situation. Well, I'm going to explain to you next. Attempting to implement wrong strategy is a passport to failure, especially in a crisis. So we need to make sure that whatever the strategies we are going to implement, they can be high level, corporate level strategies, business level, functional level, whatever the kind of strategies you want to implement, you have to make sure that they are, let's say, they can withstand the various demands of the crisis. So we cannot make mistakes in selecting and implementing or executing strategies. When I was writing this book, one of the key objectives I had was, in textbooks, we don't come across strategy testing tools. If you come across, tell me. There are limited number of strategy testing tools, but the perspective or the scope is different. So I have come up with a strategy testing tool. I will quickly explain you what you can do and how you can use this. In executing any strategy, we need to understand what we really expect from the strategy. In other words, we are concerned about the returns. Returns. Nero, if you can show the diagram I shared with you, that would be great. Even if it is
Sure.
not the case, yeah, I'll try to
Sure. Let
explain.
me try that. Yeah, let me try that.
I call this tool a hexagon. It has 6 different elements, 6 different words, starting with the English letter R. The very first R is returns. In crafting a strategy, we need to be mindful about what we really expect. What is the outcome we need to achieve? The goals we expect. That is the end result we are expecting from the strategy we are going to implement. So returns, can we quantify the returns? So that is fine. So what you see is the tool I'm introducing through my book. It goes as the R hexagon. If you can pay attention to the first block on your the right in the diagram, it is the very first one. Returns. What do we really expect to achieve? Number one. Number two, in order to achieve these returns, what kind of actions we need to take? I name them as the responses or response. So we identified returns. What do we want to achieve? Think of tools already known to you in setting business goals, in setting goals for ourselves as individuals. We use the SMART principle. I'm sure you all know the goals have to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time oriented. Yes, think about those things as well. Anyway, we have identified the returns we are expecting. In order to achieve those returns, we need to have certain responses, actions. Let's identify them as the next. That is block number two. And the third are no point in identifying the returns, the responses. We need to be able to mobilize resources. It includes manpower, technology, plant and machinery, whatever the other inputs, including raw materials, the resources. And we all realize that in a pandemic or in a crisis situation, we may have the machines in the factory, but we cannot reach the factory. Okay. We do have people already, capable people, they cannot report for work. Reach is a mandatory thing, especially when you are facing a crisis. How easily we can access resources and the markets we are operating. So that is number 4. Number 5, especially when you are facing a crisis, relations you maintain with external agencies. It may be travel restrictions, it may be something to do with limited supplies you experience. Those external relationships or special relationships would be very crucial for survival and growth. So I'm asking the question, do we have that kind of relationships? And the sixth R is about risks. When you say risk, what can go wrong in implementing this strategy? Risks include market risk, financial risk, technology risk, reputational risk, and it could even be legal risks. So I'm offering you a very interesting, very simple tool, what I named as R hexagon. Before implementing any strategy, try to go through, try to scan the strategy in respect of these 6 R's. Are we clear about the returns we expect from this strategy? Is our action right? Do we have the resources available with us? Are the resources available with us? Number 4, do we have the reach? And number 5, external relations or relations which can be very crucial in executing the strategy. And the last one, risk. If you carefully scan all these 6 areas, you can make your strategy a very robust one. You don't need to execute a strategy without knowing the end result. We are pushed to, we are compelled to implement strategies in the absence of simple tools to test the feasibility of a strategy before executing. We tend to implement. While implementing, we come across various problems and we may succeed, we may fail, or we may not get the desired outcome. So use this tool, which I'm explaining in the book. I explained it to you, the basic framework of this. Let me quickly explain you how this came to my mind. Okay, this is not something I just derived. No, I did research. If I explain it theoretically, it was a qualitative study. I studied through thematic analysis how Sri Lanka's COVID-19 prevention task force during the first wave of COVID-19 here in Sri Lanka managed to face the problem, managed to successfully handle various challenges they had in terms of controlling the disease, in terms of tracing the let's say infected parties, in terms of providing food and security, in terms of ensuring the utility service providers, suppliers, so many different areas. The government announced them as, let's say, line of commands. They identified 6 different areas, and each area was managed by the state authorities in a very successful manner. So I was wondering, corporate sector, private sector could not respond swiftly when we were facing the first COVID wave. Private sector was very, let's say, I should say, slow in responding to the pandemic in terms of resuming business, in terms of adapting new or innovative methods to reach customers, in terms of their CSR activities, large corporate organizations were very slow. Obvious reason, you cannot decide and immediately implement things. There's a way to do this. There's a hierarchy, there's a structure, there's a way of getting various approvals and so on. So you take time. But government organizations as well as mid-sized organizations and startups and let's say individuals who are running businesses, they responded swiftly. So I started looking at carefully how the government authorities were managing various affairs, various projects. Imagine in a country where we have some 700,000 pensioners, senior citizens. Some countries closed down all of a sudden, leaving millions of people on the roads. We manage it in a totally different way. We even sent vehicles, public transport provided to those pensioners or senior citizens. They were transported to their banks, and the government authorities, especially the armed forces, they took care of facilitating them to buy their, let's say, medicines and various other things, and they took back them to their own places safely. Imagine when you are dealing with an unknown pandemic and attempting to facilitate. The government authorities succeeded. So I was thinking, how did they manage all these different kind of projects while facing an unknown pandemic? When I was going through this using the thematic analysis technique, I was able to understand that they were targeting or they were focusing on those six different areas. I renamed each and every block in the hexagon in such a way that the letters or the words start with the letter R so that you can easily remember. So one of the key takeaways from today's discussion, I'm offering you guys a tool to test any strategy before you implement. Take care of these six R's, R hexagon. You need to take care of the returns, what the response you are going to show to achieve the returns, whether you have the required resources, the reach, and then the relations and risks. So those are the six different areas you need to take care of. And I'm connecting this tool to almost all the functional areas of a business organization so that you can think of a large, substantial number of strategies to face the crisis. As an example, I can tell you maintenance engineers, maintenance managers listening to me, what is your approach in a situation like this? Activity level of your organization has come down or have come down drastically, and it is let's say a time to celebrate, or it is a time period where we do not have that much of work. That is the traditional thinking, isn't it? But in the book I'm showing you 20 plus different strategies you can think of to help your organization to face the crisis, not only to survive but to thrive in the crisis. So, if time permits, I can quickly take you through some of those key areas. Niro, do you have any questions to ask?
No, I think it's perfect, Dr. Shanta. So you can proceed. You can take some time explaining those key areas as well.
Well, I'll quickly take you through some selected strategies I'm suggesting. It does not mean to say that we have only these many strategies to implement, execute when we are facing a crisis. This book offers you some 240 different strategic insights. Under each functional area, you get a list of 20 plus. It does not mean to say that you have only 240. I'm sure as experienced managers, entrepreneurs, you can come up with better ideas, better suggestions, better strategies. One advice: before implementing any strategy, when you are facing a crisis, you have to make sure that your strategy is robust. It can withstand the pressure, various demands a crisis is demanding. So use my tool, the R hexagon, before executing any strategy. I'll take you through few selected strategic insights as appearing in my book. I will select at least one from each section, each functional area. Think of finance. In facing a crisis, what can we do? I'm suggesting out of 20 plus strategies, one of them is try to have a lean and a clean balance sheet. A lean and a clean balance sheet. There can be a lot of redundant stocks, unwanted assets, unutilized or underutilized plant and machinery. Review them. You may dispose. Some people might argue whether this is the time to dispose plant and machinery, redundant stocks, but my suggestion, I'm justifying it with, let's say, various points to have a clean and lean balance sheet. That is one suggestion. Under finance, under sales and marketing, I suggested you to already suggested instead 4 P's or 7 P's, try the 8 or 10 C's I'm suggesting. At the same time, I'm suggesting organizations to use the concept of product continuum. What is product continuum? I'm sure marketeers in the forum, you are familiar with the term product continuum. Don't think if you run a business organization or you are employed in a business organization, you offer so many products. The products can be physical goods or services or a combination. Product continuum suggests that there are no 100% physical products or 100% services in this world. It is a combination of physical goods and services, what you offer as your products. Even if you consider a pure service, like let's say it can be teaching, it can be hotel services, it can be airlines, it can be providing electricity. There are physical goods or elements of goods in the product. So think about any product you offer, whether you are into service-oriented business, or whether you are into offering, let's say, physical products, physical goods. See it as a combination of goods and services. Why? It gives you a lot of opportunities to add more value, to innovate. So I'm suggesting 20 plus strategies under marketing. Niro, if I attempt to explain what we can do under human resources management, I'm giving very basic advices plus some complex ones as well. One strategic insight I'm sharing is broad basing ownership. Many entrepreneurs listening to me, you will endorse that you had or you are still having sleepless nights as we are facing this global pandemic and the consequent economic crisis. You have borrowed money, you have so many obligations, you have X number of people on board, you need to continue with your business. But do you think that this is not to underestimate the next layer or any individual employee of any business organization? Do you think that the same pressure, the same stress is there to all the employees? If you tend to think so, you are wrong. You are wrong. Why not you share this ownership of your organization? I'm not suggesting you to donate shares of your organization, but think carefully the suggestion. If you can broad base the ownership, let's say a chunk of 5% of the ownership of products or the company ownership is shared among the senior employees. Do we have the mindset to do that? I don't think so. crisis is a time period where we need to try out such things so that
Mhm.
the ownership is felt by everyone. This is my organization. If not, if you suggest, look, we are going to reduce salaries by 10%, 15%, 50%, how do people react? When you have one owner or few owners and hundreds of employees, it's extremely difficult to execute such decisions. But imagine if you have instead two, three owners, you have 20 owners. Their ownership can be
Mhm.
very minute. Still, they take the
Correct.
ownership, and it is easy to implement such strategies. Nero, any questions?
Great point, Doctor. Yeah, Doctor. On that point, actually, right? So what you just mentioned is really, really interesting. If I just try to relate my own experience, I actually joined Vetstoria, my current company, during the first wave of COVID pandemic, right?
Yeah,
So I, of course, had the risk that everyone was going through because the world was collapsing a bit, right? Because it was a shock for most of the companies and countries. So I went through the same pressure, right? So I joined this company, and then one thing I realized is what exactly you said. I didn't see that hierarchical ownership, and I didn't see, the CEO, the CTO, the leaders that I saw they are claiming themselves, this is owned by us, right? One thing I realized is that that ownership was collective, right? I felt even most of the people that I interacted with felt the same, right? I felt that there's a great control of owning that responsibility, right? And I think that was a big thing that hit my mind because I did not experience it in many cases, right? Of course, we talk about shared responsibility, co-creation, owning, all that, right? But they stop at a theoretical level, right? So it's really critical. Again, coming to the personal perspective, Dr. Shant, right? So in that crisis, family crisis situation that I just introduced in the beginning, that is exactly what we did, right? That was, it wasn't just one person going through that. We have to own it together, right? Yeah. So
correct.
of course, my wife had to go through the toughest part, right? But we worked together. We made decisions together, and even my daughter, 8 years by that time, right? Our job was to let her understand what we are going through,
Mm.
right? We knew that the end news is going to be sad, right? So we were kind of strategizing. Myself and my wife were talking to daughter. We were strategizing to be rationalized, not to distract ourselves in that tough situation, right? I'm proud to say, we as a family we never cried over that incident, Dr. Shant, right? And this was the biggest time that taught us the biggest lesson as a family, right? So I think it's a very personal context, but it's very relevant to every crisis that we go through, irrespective of how big they are, where they happen, right? So it's really great point, doctor. Yeah, doctor, like, can I check? Are you okay to spend the next 10 minutes?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so in that case, I would like to just summarize what we have been discussing. Again, Dr. Chandana, the question is basically before we go to the summarization, have you noticed any paradoxes in navigating through crisis situations? Any kind of the situations and the context that is easily misunderstood and misinterpreted by the people who go through it? Do you remember such paradoxes in your experience?
Well, I can list down so many, 1 to 10 at a stretch. But let me start with a very
Right,
basic one. When we are
right,
facing a crisis, we need to think
right.
seriously about the situation we are dealing with. In thinking, how do we do that? How do we think usually as managers, as professionals, as matured people, as experienced businessmen, how do we think? That kind of thinking is known as rational or logical thinking. What is rational or logical thinking? We use a lot of numbers, we collect a lot of data, we use a lot of information, we do various calculations, computations. In our business organizations, we do see this. Before making any decision, managers tend to think seriously. In doing so, they do a lot of calculations, computations. Will they stop there? No. They do forecasting. They try to predict future. Will they stop there? No. They do sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, and so many things, simulations, and so on. We keep on drilling down things using a lot of data. That is one side, one extreme. Think of a straight line, horizontal. One extreme is this rational thinking or logical thinking. Most of the time, managers operate on this side, logical or rational thinking. But is it the only way available for us to think? No. Without any fear, without any boundaries, without assuming that there's a boss superior who is looking at me, I can think freely. That is creative thinking. That is creative thinking. Can I think creatively by restricting myself to the logical side? No. Can I be logical with creative thinking? No. Now it is a paradoxical situation. But smart managers can blend the two sides. Okay, that is what I have explained in
Right.
most of the chapters, how to blend the two sides. Another quick example is we come across customizing our products. The demand is there to customize, tailor make our products to meet the exact needs of our
Right.
customers. But doing that, we are moving away from standardizing the product. Standardization and customization, they are on two different extremes on the same horizontal line. But smart managers can think of blending the two sides. In a crisis, you must necessarily try to do this. Blending the two sides of paradoxical situations we come across. If you read the book, you will come across so many examples. Niro, can I explain one more thing? I wanted to explain under production and operations, and even in the
Excellent.
area
Yeah.
of innovations. Well, I'm talking about the
Sure.
unnecessary complexities we have added to our products. The product you offer through your company can be a physical good or service, but look at carefully. We have made, most of our organizations have made the products we offer unnecessarily very complex and complicated. My usual example in the MBA class is how fast you can switch on your TV. Will it respond as you wish? No, it takes its own time to boot up, and so many different devices are connected. It's a hassle to switch on the TV in a hurry. People are fed up with complexities of products. This is the best time for us to make our products simple. This is not my own thinking. Okay, there are academics, there are researchers who are suggesting this as a strategy, this as a technique. We call it reverse positioning. The product has gone along the product life cycle. It may be in the mature stage with a lot of complicated and unwanted features. Let's drag it back to the introductory stage. There are so many terms. Reverse innovation is also connected. You can think of. You need to read the book to get the real excitement of these strategic insights. 200 plus.
Yeah.
Yes, Neerav.
So Dr. Shanta was generous enough to send this to me. Thank you for that. And I actually couldn't go through it yet. But I really see great value in it, segmented into different chapters, talking about the mindset, strategy, then the human resource perspective, pretty much everything that you need to tackle in terms of going through a crisis situation. Particularly if you are an entrepreneur, If you are someone who wants to kind of jump out from where you are individually or in a corporate perspective, I think this is going to change your game. Get that? As the name suggests, right? It will prepare you to face the next crisis that may come your way, right? So with that, Dr. Shant, I would like to kind of take a few minutes to wrap up what we have been discussing, right? So I basically will have two questions for you. One before the last, right? Question is, now if again I want to use the personal context, right? Will you be able to just tell us, if I face a challenging situation tomorrow, irrespective of what it is, as I mentioned, it could be a mental struggle, it could be a threatening happens, it could be a economical crisis, it could be something that's going to impact me. What is, if you try to put it to, let's say, few steps, right? What are the primary steps that I need to take care of? Step one, step two, step three, whatever the number of steps that you propose. Is there a structure around that? Is there a way I could say this is the way I should approach that crisis situation?
Well, as I told you at the beginning, we need to understand the situation properly. But one of the biggest challenges we may come across is the crisis will not come giving you adequate time to meet your consultants, read books,
Yes.
and do a lot of experiments, calculations, computations, and so on. Sometimes you have
Yeah.
to make quick decisions. Okay, that's why I
Spontaneous.
said, think of a crisis situation an individual is facing, drowning in the sea
Mm,
or in a
mm,
river. Okay, intentionally or unintentionally, you try to do two things: how
mm.
best we can reduce the unfavorable outcomes, how best we can increase the favorable outcomes. Think about these two areas. Prepare a short list, 5 items on one side, favorable outcomes, and unfavorable outcomes, 5 items. From this list of 10 or 20, pick the most vital few. If you, when you implement them, vulnerabilities to your stakeholders or to you would be reduced. If I go back to a business organization, Nero, how best I can reduce waste, how best I can reduce customer complaints, returns, and so on.
Mm.
So those are the things I need to reduce.
Right.
And what should I increase? It can be my market share, the value addition, and various other things. So select from these two lists favorable outcomes and unfavorable outcomes, few items, and they are going to be strategized. In executing or in implementing the strategy, use the R hexagon before implementing so that your strategy is a very robust one. And something interesting, I'm offering a brand new
Excellent. Yeah.
tool. I'm offering a brand new tool in this book. You all are familiar with mind mapping, but I'm offering you something called word mapping. Word mapping. Nero, if you can give me 2 minutes, I can explain the background. I introduced a tool sometimes back that goes as Innovation
Right.
Tautogram.
Right.
Innovation Tautogram. It is available in the internet. In some 200 different sites, you would see it as a accepted tool. Innovation
So,
Tautogram.
yeah.
The logic here is our vocabulary is very powerful. There are so many things known to us, but as
Mm,
products, they are not available. So I'm suggesting you a new tool that goes
mm.
as word mapping. The word crisis, I'm exploring it,
Right.
connecting it to each discipline, each functional area. If you are an accountant,
Right.
by looking at the word CRISIS, you have this many different areas, 6 different areas to be mindful when you are facing
Mm.
a crisis. If you are the
Right.
production manager, there are 6 different areas pertaining to each letter CRISIS. That
Right.
is an amazing list of six
Right.
strategic insights for each functional area.
Got it. Excellent. I mean, that's wonderful perspectives, Dr. Shanta. Yeah. So as I just feel, this book is so valuable for anyone who wants to strategize around the crisis situations, and this give some solid examples, solid case studies. Even one thing that I really like when I skim through it, Dr. Shanta, is that you personalize, you kind of give certain hilarious examples, right, from what you have seen and observed, right, which is great as well. Yeah. Uh, so I'm okay to spend the time, but I think the audience is gonna face some challenges listening to us for hours and hours, and and then I'm really conscious about your valuable time as well. So, Doctor, the last question from me. In terms of crisis management, right? As much as you wrote this book, you would have gone through a lot of crisis in your life, your corporate experience. What is that single lesson that you thought, this is it, right? As long as I remember this lesson, I'm able to go through any given crisis situation. Do you recall anything as such? Any that single lesson that you can share with us? What is that single lesson that you can share with us in terms of facing any critical crisis situation?
Well, any crisis situation will not prevail forever. Things change. That's what we have learned through our religions as well. No situation will continue forever. Things will change. So have a
Right.
positive mindset in facing the crisis. Consider crisis as an opportunity, not to exploit unethically, unprofessionally, but to add value to take care of your stakeholders. Crisis offers you a great opportunity to reposition yourself, your organization, and to revisit the life as well, isn't it, Nero?
Yes. Yes. Definitely. Definitely. Yeah, so excellent. So I'm pretty much in line, with everything that you have been telling us. Unfortunately, some technical glitches didn't help me to do the session as per my expectation. But doctor, that itself explain what it could be, right? So personally, it was a crisis for me, and it was a crisis for two of us. So I think we managed to navigate through it the best way possible, right? In the background, I was trying to reconnect and continue the discussion, but it didn't actually help me. It's a rare incident, but that happened, right? So with that, the last perspective that you brought up is really, really insightful for me personally, in a corporate perspective as well, in terms of thinking of my own profession, my job, kind of the startup work that I do. It is inevitable that crisis will happen. Things will change. Things will not happen the way you expect. And as Dr. Shant mentioned, one thing that we need to remember really, really well is that none of these things will stay forever. None of them, right? None of the things that happens around you will stay as it is. Let them pass, right? Let them go. I think that is a fundamental lesson I learned in the biggest challenging situation in my personal life, and that was the moment that told me, "Hey, there is a great opportunity in this tough time." The challenge was to find it out. It's not easy, right? It's not obviously telling you and then coming and appearing saying this is your opportunity, pick it. No, these opportunities are in those tough situations. If you look at any person who has done great, any business who has gone up to billion, multi-billion dollar companies, they all have gone through tough times, but they were clever enough to pick up that opportunity or set of opportunities and optimize that, right? So it's all about value proposition. It is all about strategizing yourself to get the best value out of what you are going through. So with that, we are going to end up the session. Again, thank you very much, Dr. Shanta, for spending your valuable time, which would cost a lot, I know for sure, right? So you are generous to share that time and your insights with all of us. Truly appreciative.
Thank you, Niro. Thank you
So
for
hope that
having
I
me.
will
It was a
catch
pleasure.
up with you soon again on a discussion like this. I'll say goodbye to you and thank you very much everyone who has been joining who have been joining us, who have been participating in this particular session. So if you like the discussion, if you think this can help someone out there in your network, in your family, share this feed with your loved ones, your known ones, and I'm sure this is going to be a really great sharing that you're going to do. So with that, we are going to end up the session. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank
Face
you,
any
everyone.
given crisis situation with courage, with some of the best strategies possible. Think of the ways to get out of the situations, strategize, and I'm sure all of you are going to do fantastic in the coming days, weeks, and years. Until we see you again, take care, stay safe. Thank you very
Stay
much,
safe.
Dr.
Bye.
Shant again.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you. Thank you very much. And it's definitely my privilege to host you as well. Yeah,
Thank you,
take care
Niro, for the
and
opportunity. Thank you.
talk to you soon.